It was supposed to be just another weekend, nothing remarkable, nothing worth remembering. Life had settled into a routine so rigid that every day blurred into the next, yet beneath the surface something restless stirred. She told herself it was just a phase, that marriage always cooled after the early fires, but deep inside she felt the weight of silence, a silence that echoed louder than any argument ever could. Nights at the dinner table had turned into short exchanges about bills and schedules. The man she had married was still there, reliable and steady, but somehow absent at the same time, as if his body stayed while his spirit had moved on to other places. She wanted to believe that stability was enough, yet the longing for something more, something alive, unpredictable, and passionate, kept whispering in the back of her mind. He worked long hours, often coming home exhausted, his face buried in his phone or laptop, promising they'd take a trip soon or have a date night when things slowed down. But things never slowed down. She tried to keep herself busy, convincing herself that this was just adulthood, that love didn't need sparks to survive. Still, there were moments when she looked at him and wondered if he ever noticed how much of her had gone unnoticed. It wasn't hatred she felt, nor resentment, it was hunger for a different kind of attention, the kind that made her. That hunger began to take shape when she met him, the other man. At first, there was nothing extraordinary, nothing planned. He was just there, showing up at the right moments, with words that carried warmth her husband's didn't. A smile that lingered, a compliment that wasn't casual, a gaze that seemed to pause a little longer than it should have. She told herself not to overthink, but the way he laughed at her jokes, the way he leaned in as if every word she spoke mattered, it was impossible not to notice. For the first time in a long while, she felt light again, almost girlish, as though someone had pulled her out of a fog. The contrast was sharp. At home, routine dictated every hour. Outside, in these stolen conversations, she rediscovered curiosity and thrill. It wasn't about love at first, it was about validation. She felt her confidence return, felt beautiful again in a way she hadn't for years. His presence reminded her of a version of herself she had buried beneath responsibilities and predictability. And as much as she tried to brush it off, she couldn't deny the small rush that came with each interaction, a rush she carried back home and kept hidden like a secret flame. But secrets have a way of growing, stretching from innocent smiles into dangerous thoughts. At night, while lying beside her husband, she would find herself replaying a laugh or a phrase the other man had said. It was subtle, harmless in appearance, yet the feelings carried weight. A dangerous curiosity began to grow in her chest. Could there be more? Would she ever dare to step outside the boundaries she had promised never to cross? The questions themselves felt like betrayal, but they refused to go away. Her husband remained unaware, too busy, too distracted. And perhaps that was part of the problem. It wasn't that he had stopped loving her, it was that he had stopped noticing. She longed for the electricity of being wanted, of being admired, and now she had found a taste of it elsewhere. Something inside told her she was playing with fire, that nothing good ever comes from stepping into the shadows of desire, yet temptation had already slipped through the cracks. Sometimes, it isn't a sudden fall but a slow slide, and she felt herself sliding without resistance. The stage was being set, and though she didn't yet realize it, the night that would change everything was already moving close. The first time it happened, it didn't feel dangerous, not yet. It started with conversation that stretched longer than it should have, with glances that lingered just a moment too long. She told herself it was harmless, just friendliness, but deep down she knew there was something different in the way he looked at her. His attention carried weight, an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Each word felt charged, each laugh shared seemed to close the distance between them. She could sense a line in the sand, invisible but unmistakable, and every time she stood near him, she found herself leaning closer to it. He gave her something she hadn't felt in years, acknowledgement. Not just of her role as a wife, not as someone reliable or dependable, but as a woman. His compliments weren't casual, they had an edge of desire tucked beneath their surface. A passing remark about the way her hair caught the light, the way her voice carried, or the way she moved, it was enough to ignite something she had thought was lost forever. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't overlooked. She was seen, fully and deliberately. That simple fact was intoxicating. She tried to resist at first. Each time her phone lit up with his name, She hesitated. She reminded herself of her vows, her life, her home. But hesitation grew shorter, and replies came quicker. Their conversations shifted from casual to personal, from surface-level chatter to deeper confessions. He asked questions her husband hadn't asked in years, questions that probed her heart, her dreams, her frustrations. And she found herself answering honestly, too honestly. With every word she gave away a little more of herself, until she realized she had begun sharing parts of her soul with someone who wasn't her husband. The temptation wasn't sudden, it built like a storm, quietly gathering force until it could no longer be ignored. One evening, when they found themselves alone in a corner, their laughter hung in the air a little too long. His hand brushed against hers, a simple gesture that should have meant nothing. But her body reacted before her mind could intervene. A shiver traveled up her arm, and she didn't pull away. For the first time, she felt the electricity of possibility, and it terrified her as much as it thrilled her. Later that night, lying in bed beside her husband, she replayed that brief touch over and over again. The warmth of it lingered, overshadowing the familiar presence beside her. She wondered how something so small could feel so significant. Guilt gnawed at her, but guilt was powerless against the rush she felt. The hunger inside her, long ignored, was awake now, and it was demanding more. The next time they met, the boundary shifted again. Their conversations carried a different weight, every word laced with unspoken meaning. His eyes held hers longer, daring her to acknowledge what both already knew. When he leaned in closer to whisper something, she didn't move away. She let the closeness wash over her, her heart pounding as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff. And then came the moment she knew she was crossing into forbidden ground. His hand lingered at the. She told herself it was just a game, that nothing serious would come of it. A thrill, a distraction, nothing more. But deep inside, she knew it wasn't a game anymore. It was a hunger that had tasted the first drop of water and now wanted the whole ocean. She knew she was on the edge of something dangerous, something irreversible. And yet, even with that knowledge, she felt herself drawn in, step by step, breath by breath. The night that would strip away her innocence and redefine her marriage was no longer a distant possibility. It was right in front of her, waiting, inevitable. And she wasn't sure if she wanted to stop it. One night was all it took. She hadn't planned it, hadn't mapped it out in her mind, but the moment unfolded as though it had been waiting for her all along. The air was heavy with music and low laughter, the kind of background noise that makes everything else feel private, intimate. He was beside her, close enough that she could sense his warmth, close enough that the space between them felt charged with something unsaid. Her pulse raced in ways she couldn't control. Every rational thought screamed at her to step back, to remember the promises she had made, but the hunger inside her silenced all warnings. When his lips brushed hers for the first time, it was like a spark to dry wood. Sudden, fierce, impossible to contain. The kiss was not gentle, not hesitant, it was the collision of years of denial and days of rising temptation. She didn't stop him. She kissed him back with an urgency she hadn't felt in years, an urgency that surprised even her. The world outside that room faded. There was no marriage, no loyalty, no future consequences, only the overwhelming fire of the moment. Their hands found each other, desperate and unsteady. He pulled her closer, and she let herself fall into him, every barrier collapsing. Her breath caught in her throat as his touch traced paths across skin that had almost forgotten what it was like to be wanted so deeply. Her body answered him before her mind had time to protest. It wasn't slow or cautious, it was hungry, reckless, and alive. She had thought about this, imagined fragments of what it might feel like, but the reality was sharper, more intoxicating than anything she had prepared herself for. It wasn't just the physicality of it, it was the forbidden thrill, the awareness that she was doing what she had sworn she never would. The betrayal made it more dangerous, more electric. The rush was like standing in the middle of a storm, lightning cracking all around, and instead of running for shelter, she opened her arms wide to embrace it. Time blurred. She lost track of where one kiss ended and the next began. She clung to him, craving more, needing more, her body aching with a desire that drowned out every whisper of guilt. In those moments, she wasn't a wife, wasn't tied to anything. She was simply a woman rediscovering passion she thought was gone forever. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, there was silence. The storm slowed, leaving only heavy breaths and a ringing in her ears. She lay there, skin against skin, the weight of what she had done pressing down on her chest like a stone. The passion still lingered, but beneath it was something darker, heavier. Guilt crept in like a shadow, reminding her of the man who trusted her, of the home she had built, of the life that could crumble with one wrong word. She turned to look at him, the man who had just crossed a line with her, and saw not a savior but a mirror reflecting her choices. The thrill was still there, but it was tangled now with fear, shame, and the quiet question she couldn't escape. What happens next? The room felt smaller. The night felt longer. She closed her eyes, trying to hold on to the fleeting warmth, but the taste of betrayal was already settling on her tongue. Nothing would ever be the same. Word count, ~574 white heavy checkmark. Shall I move ahead and craft section 4, 570 plus words, with the consequences and reflection to complete the story? Morning light always tells the truth. She woke with a start, her body still humming from the storm of the night before, but her chest heavy with the weight of reality. The room felt colder, quieter. For a moment she let her eyes linger on him, the man who had been the answer to her hunger, but as the haze of passion cleared, his presence no longer felt like liberation, it felt like evidence. She sat up slowly, gathering herself, the voice of guilt finally loud enough to drown out the echoes of desire. Her phone buzzed on the table, its screen lighting up with a simple message from her husband, "Good morning, love." The words stabbed sharper than any accusation could. She stared at them for a long time, her throat dry, her chest tightening with the reminder of everything she had risked. A single night had created a chasm between who she was and who she pretended to be, and now she would have to live with it. He reached for her hand, a silent gesture that asked if she was still his in this new reality. She pulled away gently, not with anger, but with the sudden awareness that whatever they shared could never be simple. The secrecy had given it flavor, the forbidden had made it sweet, but daylight stripped it bare. What had felt like fire hours ago now felt like ashes in her mouth. The ride home was suffocating. Every street sign, every familiar corner seemed to whisper of betrayal. She tried to imagine her husband's face if he ever discovered the truth, the way his steady eyes would harden into disbelief, the way his trust would shatter without repair. The thought made her stomach turn, yet another thought, darker and quieter, sat beside it, the memory of how alive she had felt, how powerful the rush had been. It wasn't only guilt that haunted her, it was the possibility of wanting it again. Days passed, but the secret didn't fade. It lingered like a bruise under the skin, invisible but aching with every touch. Around her husband, she smiled, cooked meals, laughed at the right moments, but inside she was split in two. Part of her wanted to bury the night forever, to lock it away where no one could find it. Another part replayed it again and again, addicted to the rush, wondering if the cost was worth the danger. She became hyper-aware of every detail. The way she checked her phone in secret. The way her husband's questions, innocent and casual, suddenly felt loaded with suspicion. He hadn't noticed, not yet, but she knew she was leaving traces in her behavior, shadows in her voice. She wondered if the truth would eventually leak out, not through confession, but through the cracks guilt always creates. One evening, as her husband leaned over to kiss her cheek, she felt herself flinch. It wasn't because she no longer loved him, it was because she had betrayed that love, and the purity of his affection felt like a mirror reflecting her deceit. Tears pricked her eyes, though she disguised them with laughter, and he never asked why. Alone later that night, she stared at herself in the mirror, searching for the woman she used to be. She saw someone else now, someone who had crossed a line she once believed unbreakable. She whispered a promise to herself that it would never happen again, but the whisper lacked conviction. The memory was still too fresh, the hunger still too alive. One night. Just one night, and it had been enough to change everything. She had discovered passion, yes, but also the cost of it, the haunting guilt, the shadowed silence, the invisible distance now lying between her and the man who trusted her. The world outside would never know, but she would carry the truth in her chest like a hidden scar. Because betrayal doesn't end with the act. It lingers. It follows. And no matter how deep it is buried, it breathes beneath the surface. One night, no fine, Just 13 inches of desire and a lifetime of remembering that some choices can never be undone. Word count, ~578 white heavy checkmark. The full 4 sections now complete your 2,000+ word infidelity story script. Do you want me to stitch all 4 together into a clean, continuous narration script ready for your faceless video?